I'm a Yorkshireman, okay? And I don't say that because I want to alienate a third of the audience at the outset. I'm not telling you that because I want to explain why I've got this strange habit of flattening my vowels out in this otherwise middle-class demeanour. I'm saying it because I think I want to establish myself as the arch cynic and pessimist, okay? And I went to South by Southwest. Suki did a job of explaining South by Southwest. Does anyone need any further explanation as to what it is? No. I went viewing it as being, it was going to be a digital jamboree. It was going to be technology for technology's sake and full of self-indulgent geekery. And I couldn't actually have been wronger, if that makes sense. You can say wronger. It was absolutely fantastic. Because the questions it asked were not the ones that we were expecting it to ask, if that makes sense. And actually, it's far less about technology for technology's sake, and much more about how technology can change the world for the better and help humanity to be better. Now that sounds strange coming from a Yorkshireman to some degree, but it was a very, very, very invigorating experience. And actually, Biz Stone, who is the founder of Twitter, put it thus. The change that we are trying to do and the sorts of things that you're going to hear about is not a triumph of technology, it's a triumph of humanity. Okay, so it's not just technology for technology's sake. Now, I think these are the guys that went. There were 5 of us, and I think some of you will be reassured to see that there are 2 bearded people here, and there was another bearded person on this side of the camera. So there's been plenty of bearded input into the content, which I think gives it much more credibility than me standing here. I decided 5 years ago on reading an article in The Guardian which said that people with facial hair are 20% less trustworthy, never to have any facial hair at all. I didn't think the combination of advertising a cow man and beard was setting me up for general trustworthiness in life, so I've avoided it ever since. And what we've got are the 5 questions that we feel we discussed at the end of the day and at the end of the conference on the flight back. And that's what we're putting to you. So hopefully they are provocative questions. They're the key questions we think came out of our experiences at the conference. I haven't fact-checked any of this stuff, okay, because this is a feat of memory. So none of it is fact-checked. I might get everything wrong. It's other people's content, so you just can't blame me, okay? So the future this is a rhetorical question. The future, what's not to like? We saw this guy, Peter Diamandis, okay, who is the guy who runs the X Prize Foundation, who set the big challenges to solve the world's big questions and issues. And he's a very pugnacious, I wouldn't say he's from Brooklyn, he's probably not, he's from the US. He's very, very pugnacious and very, very optimistic. And he says the future is going to be utterly fantastic. It's going to be abundant. And he's written a book about it, actually, which is called Abundance. And he says that the reasons that people have to be optimistic about the future and believe it's going to be abundant are because of technology and the speed at which it's moving, okay? And he also says, look at the past, look at recent history, look at the last 100 years. In the last 100 years, everything is moving in the right direction. Lifespan is up, average per capita income is up, childhood mortality is down. All of those things are true, and there's no reason to believe that the future won't be brilliant. The only reason to believe it's not brilliant is because we've all got a little inner Yorkshireman which is our amygdala, which is there as our sort of early warning system and danger detector, which says to us, oh, I don't want to say it does in a Jimmy Savile type voice or a Jeffrey Boycott voice for those who know who those people are, but it's kind of like, oh, it's going to be gloomy. Just be careful, it's not so good. You think it's going to be like Blade Runner, and it's not going to be that good. But he says, actually, it's all fine. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Moore's Law. But Moore's Law shows that the pace of change is exponential. And it's very, very difficult, his point is, to understand and appreciate what exponential change is like. We're all used to linear growth and things in a linear environment. Linear is quite easy to get your head around. 30 steps in a linear environment is, I'm going to be somewhere over by the bar. 30 steps in an exponential growth environment, I'm going to be billions and billions of steps away. Okay? So the speed of change is very, very, very difficult to get your head around. $1,000 now buys you the computational power of one mouse brain. By 2050, that same $1,000 will buy you the computational power of every human brain on the planet. Okay? Any issues which you might believe exist in terms of scarcity of resource will be solved in this incredible wave of growth. Okay? And the new technologies that are riding this are this ever-quickening and never-to-crash wave of infinite computing to the cloud, sensors and networks, robotics, 3D printing, which is going to put the means of production in every single person's home at some point, if they can afford it, which is an incredible game changer in terms of the things that will change. Synthetic biology, digital medicine, nanomaterials, and AI. And obviously those things will converge and come together and mutate and create new things. So the speed of change is just incredibly difficult to get your head around. Additional to this, he says 3 billion people will join the global conversation by 2020. That's 3 billion more voices, 3 billion more people adding in solutions, and actually 3 billion more people who are plugged into the network and spending their money in this new economy. So the future, Diamandis says, is going to be good, and it's coming ever more quickly. The second question, posed by Tim O'Reilly, with a fine beard and therefore fine credentials. Tim O'Reilly was the first man to have a commercial page on the World Wide Web. He's the owner and developer of computer manuals, so O'Reilly Publishing. He's been around since the very start. And I think what struck us about what he was saying was that there's a lot of debate, obviously, about capitalism. You know, it's gone wrong, the bankers are to blame, but actually very few people asking the questions that we need to ask about how we move forward from this point. It's a very, very binary question. Are you going to create value today, or are you going to capture value today? And his point is that in to create a sustainable economy, you've got to have more people creating value than you've got capturing value, and the balance has tipped in recent times the other way away from that. So you've got people who are destroying the ecosystem, which is the economy, rather than adding to it. He uses as an example Microsoft, which he says started out with a very clear higher order purpose to begin with, which was about putting a computer in every home for the betterment of society. Now, here's the question, and here's the point that he makes, because he points the gun in our direction. He says the point at which companies go wrong is when sales and marketing takes over from engineers. Okay? Because then the focus becomes on profit. It goes away from the product and away from improving the product and improving people's lives. The cycle of capitalism, he argues, requires both consumers, and it's consumers who create value, not investors and producers. And what was interesting, I think, was that he said we're reaching a crunch time, because if more people don't take responsibility and actually want to make a difference and create value, then the problem is that technology will start to take value out of the system as well. So if you imagine a world where Siri and Watson are 16 times more powerful than they are at the moment, you can imagine a world where you might not need a call centre. So that takes a massive amount of value out of the system. Someone's got to be replacing that value. With Generation Y coming through, they don't want, as I think Aaron Shapiro said at this event last time, they don't particularly want to be involved with people. They're going to do it all themselves. They're the self-service generation. That's more value coming out in very simplistic terms, in terms of people working and people who can consume. So someone has got to be creating value for value's sake. And I think it poses interesting questions of all of us in this room, because it says, if you're in a category or a product, what is the thing that's going to change people's lives? That's the only thing that you can think about. And if you can't think of what that will be, so for example, and value can mean lots of different things, but if I was in the beer category, should we still be selling commoditized high alcohol content products at the lowest common denominator, or should we be going out there and saying, actually, we only want people to drink very little good quality beer, because that is better for society? And there would be other examples of that around the room. And Biz Stone from Twitter, his view, which takes it one step further, is that the only sort of marketing that will exist in the future is philanthropic marketing. So where you are doing good and spending money on doing good, and then telling people about the good that you're doing. And maybe, it's an interesting question when we throw it back on advertising, because if you look at the latest Advertising Association figures, which look back at the last 10 years, 10 to 15 years, the product which we are creating is valued less and less and less by the people in this country, by the consumers in this country. The downward trend is moving away from us and not positive. So what's the value that we are creating? Are we just value capturers, or can we create value? Second question. Third question. Are you going to be open or closed? Okay? It's a question which everyone asks. It's a question which is out there. There's nothing particularly revolutionary about it. I think the people from BBH Labs from Elliott made a really good kind of polar comparison. So they basically said the open system is Mad Max, and the closed system is Skynet and the Terminator. And if you look at those systems, that's a really good way of looking at the polar opposite. So in an open community, you've got freedom, you've got community, you've got peer review, you've got the free exchange of ideas and information. It's messy, it's creative, it moves in all sorts of different directions, and people can make all sorts of different choices as a result of it. It's Google in many ways. And in the closed system, you've got a system, it's quite interesting, because this event is a closed event, isn't it? You opt into it, and then you hope that you get some value out of it, and it's a safe environment in which to do that. The closed system, where you check in once to the system, it's all designed around you, you don't have to make any choices, the whole thing comes to you. It's desired, it's useful, it's authentic, it's safe, legal, controlled. It's a totalitarian state in many ways, and it's Apple. And there's a great irony, I think, if you look back at the 1984 ad, Steve Jobs, all about thinking differently and a totalitarian state which someone is revolting. He was the arch creator of a closed system and effectively a totalitarian state. What was also interesting, though, was the people who were talking about we have to move away from a closed system to find something else. So there were a couple of guys, Al Gore, Sean Parker, he was the guy who's played by Justin Timberlake in The Social Network, and Rohan Silva, who is senior policy advisor to George Osborne, who are very conscious that one of the great closed systems is government and parliament, and they are trying to move away and find a middle ground. So there are lots of systems which are inherently closed, and there's lots of guys at South by Southwest talking about how they can move away from that and let people into the system. So Rohan Silva was talking about the Red Tape Challenge, which was a lot of stuff about allowing people outside of and inside of the civil service to make suggestions as to how they can improve processes, practices, policy within that. And it caused a massive outcry, because obviously it's letting control away from the centre and letting people in between the lobbyists and the policymakers. And it doesn't always work. And the point that he was making, which was an interesting point, was actually what we believe in is crowdsourcing, but we don't believe it in the sense that we want everyone to be able to input. What we want to make sure is that we are getting, so if the issue is how do we best run the NHS, what we want to make sure is that we are getting the crowd that is genuinely capable of improving the practices around the NHS. So we want to make sure that we're getting the biggest crowd that's in the UK to improve that. And we want to understand how, in democracy, we could actually potentially reward those people for becoming part of the process and being part of the solution. So they were talking about the fact that the parliamentary system is closed and it's got to be more open, but it's really, really difficult to do it because you inherently lose control and you leave yourself exposed to journalistic catching jobs. So that's the third question. The fourth question was, what does it take to be liked? And the reason this is interesting, I think, is because the US seems to be a lot further in advance to where we are. And they're putting a lot more money into social media, and they're asking much more difficult questions of it. The question which we get asked a lot of at the moment still is actually, can we just get our likes up? That's what we'd like to do. We'd just like to get our likes up, please. And the point being made by the guys at RGA in the States was that a like is completely worthless. And what a like is a misnomer. All it is a click. It's nothing actually which suggests any greater affection for you or the brand as a result of clicking the like. And all it gives you is reach. And they're saying, what you have to do is genuinely understand. To get people to engage with your brand in the social media space, what you have to do is to genuinely understand what each of the segments that make up your audience actually like, and they are different things. So just asking them to come and like something will only give you 1% of people doing anything thereafter. So their stat is only 1% of people who like something actually go on and do anything thereafter. Even very sexy brands. So you're not really getting anything other than a very crude measure in terms of reach. And they say, sorry, this is my notes from the thing which you can't read at all, but I thought it was the easiest way of doing it. So they say you basically, very simply, got 4 segments. You've got spectators, collectors, curators, and influencers from further away, leaning back away from your brand to leaning forward and being interested in it. And they are going to give you impressions. The collectors are looking for value. The curators are going to rate and critique you. That's the sort of relationship they want with you. And the influencers are going to want to co-create with you. And you won't be able to read that at all. But spectators are looking for impressions, and all they're after, they just want to like the things that you tell them or the content that you show them. That's as far as you're going to get. Collectors are interested in what you're going to give them that's free. So they're after deals, they're after competitions, they're after something for free, and they are scouring brands for what they can get for nothing. And they'll be very happy with that. The curators, the people who are willing to rate and critique you, are interested in what you can give me that makes me look good within my network. Because I'm curating things and critiquing things, and I'm passing things on. So that's what I'm looking for. Can you give me something interesting that's going to make me look interesting within my network? And then finally, you've got the influencers who are willing to co-create with you. So they're going, what can we do together? What can we do? Because I'm really, really interested in this brand. That is that question. And the final thing, which was a very, very peculiar talk, it has to be said, was this lady, Prana Gupta, who owns a company called Kush, who make apps for the iPhone, la-di-da and Songify, okay, which they make your bad karaoke good, and they make your bad, if you just talk into it, it will make it into a song, it will songify it. And she had the challenge. So she is basically going against the orthodoxy, which is you can't understand what's going to make something viral. Her start point was, I have a global product, I have a product which needs to have global reach immediately, it's an app. How can I ensure that I could spend my money effectively and make things that go global? So she spent a lot of time stalking people on the internet and looking at, and she analysed every single thing that had gone viral above 100 million hits to work out what the common factors were and use them to her advantage. So her 6 building blocks of viral videos were, firstly, music, no surprise, but just nicking music indiscriminately will do for her. Secondly, surprise of absolutely any sort whatsoever will do. Thirdly, cuteness, which can come in many forms, but it's mostly cats, as we all know. Fourth, it's humour, and that can be anything. Slapstick's good, parody's good, pastiche is good. Fifth is boobs, or boobies, as I think that is. That's actually the spelling of it that she used in her presentation, and we believe that's an Americanism for boobies, and she literally means boobies. And sixth is celebrity. And what's interesting, though, is actually looking at the viral content that she's developed on the back of these building blocks, because you can see a little journey that she's gone on in terms of making them more successful. And I'm not going to, at any point, address that one there and show you these things. But they started very prosaically here with a very simple product demonstration.
Here I am, singing very badly in public.
So that's a start point, a simple product demonstration, a little bit of music, not a lot of surprise, a little average cuteness if you find it cute, it's cute, but not really, not a lot of humour, no boobs, and absolutely no celebrity. 192,000 hits. So that was before she'd actually done her research. And then you go to where she went next.
This is my
Which some of
first
you will have seen.
attempt at a eHarmony video. I'm nervous and I'm excited at the same time.
So, there you have, this was her next effort. You've got music, you've got surprise, you've got cuteness, you've just got cats indiscriminately put in there. You don't have boobs and you don't have celebrity. And then the last one, which is the point at which we went, okay, this is weird because it's been presented in a very, very peculiar way, but you can't argue with 49 million hits and quite a lot of downloads on the back of it. And this is basically just to use someone else out there who is getting an awful lot of hits and just to piggyback what they're doing.
Just gonna run past you on my bike.
So basically, all of the singing in that was done through Songify, and there's a guy who comes on at the end who's the guy who is the Key of Awesome producer who is regularly getting 50 million hits. And he comes on at the end and says, I did all of this through Songify. And she got, they are now You can't argue with the stats. They're in the top 10 in terms of downloads in music. And it just got us thinking, you know, we're very precious about creativity. There's very little creativity, and that's just gone. There are 6 rules, and I'm going to mash it all together and see what hits. And some of it does. So I'll just recap on the questions. Not the ones we were expecting. In the future, what's not to like? It's going to be brilliant. Are you creating more value than you're capturing? It'll only be brilliant if more of you are doing that. More of us are doing that. Are you going to be closed or open? Are you going to get to a real deeper understanding of what it is to be liked, and we're going to commit more money to doing that in the UK versus the US? And the final challenge is, you know, probably be 49 million views. And I think there are only 2 ads that I could find. There's an Evian ad and something else, which was sort of over about 49 million. So it's a decent challenge. Thank you.